All right, welcome to the Coding Your Career channel. My name is Jonathan Hopp. I'll be your instructor today, and I'm going to talk about how to create a simple React app. This tutorial is aimed at people who are just beginning with React, so if that sounds like you, you're in the right spot. All right, so we're going to make a pet adoption website. And what a pet adoption website is going to do is we're going to display the pets at our shelter, and hopefully people who think the pets are cute and are looking for a pet will be able to adopt one of these fine furry friends. Notice that we have a search bar. We also have a card for each one of our pets that includes their name, their breed, and a little bit of information about them. If you want to get more information, you can click on the details button and you can look at the pet in more detail. All right, so for example, Max is a friendly dog. He lets play fetch and it's great with kids. All right, and if you want to adopt one of these pets, maybe you think they're cuddly and cute, you want to have one in your own home, you can hit the Adopt Me button, and it will take you to a form which you will be able to fill out with your phone number and email, and we will be able to use this information and save it to our backend, and someone at the shelter will look to see if you are a good fit for the pet. The cool thing is we also have a slightly different form for dogs and cats. So for example, for dogs, I asked, do you have a fenced-in yard? But let's say we have a cat, and that does not apply to cats as much. So we are able to sort of change the user experience based on whether or not they're looking at a cat or a dog. We also can search. So for example, if I'm looking for a specific dog, let's say I'm looking for Bella, okay, I start typing in the word Bella, and then the screen automatically updated. It reacted to what I was doing. I can do it by name, I can do it by breed. Let's say I was looking for a dachshund. Okay, Lucy's a dachshund mix. Okay, and that way you were able to go through all the different dogs and cats and be able to search for them by criteria, but in this case, name or breed. So again, this is a simple React app. It does not include everything that there is to know about React. It is specifically designed for people who are just getting started and would like to play around with React a bit and maybe build off this and do their own project. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to install React and install the things we need to create a new React app. And then we are going to get the backend set up, the backend basically being the data that I am using to serve here. So like the name of the pets and their description. Okay, that data has to come from somewhere. We're going to make a mock API in order to do that so we don't have to go through all of the effort of making a real one. And then we're going to get into all the basics of React, including components and forms and routing and all that fun stuff, right? And you'll be able to have a website that looks just like this. Now, for installation, what you may need, you're going to definitely need Node.js. So if you don't have Node.js and you don't have it installed already, you definitely will need it. It will not, you do not pass code, do not collect $200. And it should be fairly easy to install, and it's free, so get that done. If at any point during the tutorial you're unsure as to what I typed or you're getting lost, and that happens a lot during these kind of video tutorials, I go through a lot of information very quickly, and there's maybe a detail you missed or didn't quite understand. We do have a GitHub repo that's down in the link below, and that you'll be able to come here and you'll be able to compare the code you have that you're working on with what's in the repo. That way you're able to more easily keep up with what I am doing. Okay, because it's very easy for beginners to get lost. That makes a lot of, it's just the way it is. All right, enough blabbing. Let's get to actually creating our pet adoption website. And as always, if you like the content of this video, please like and subscribe. And I definitely would love more people to see these tutorials, so share it with anyone you think is going on sort of a coding journey. And let me know in the comments below what you think of this tutorial. I'd love to get some feedback from folks. All right, let's get straight to it. Let's actually start and install React and create a new React app. So creating your own React app is actually very easy. We're going to be in VS Code, like I said before, and here is the terminal. If you don't know about where to go for the terminal, it should be at the top. You can just select terminal, do new terminal, and we're doing the command prompt. All right, and so all you have to really do to create a new React app is npx create -react -app, and we're going to call it Pet Finder. So after the create React app, you're going to put the name of the actual application in lowercase letters. And then we're going to use the TypeScript. So we're going to do 2 hyphens template TypeScript. All right, this is the command you're going to use to go ahead and create your React app. It might prompt you to say like, hey, do you want to download create React app? You most certainly do. All right, so just by doing this one command, it will prompt you to install the things that you need to install, and then it will install all the packages that you need for React, etc. And so create React app is not the only way to create a React app. There's definitely other ways to do it. I just think this is the most beginner-friendly one. So just go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to take a little bit, so be patient, but you should be able to see that's creating a new React app, green thing, and then it will go into installing and it'll take a few minutes. Once everything is said and done, you should be able to see happy hacking at the very end, and they tell you to cd into the new folder, which in this case is Pet Finder. So remember, when you do create React app, it creates a folder for you. You don't have to create a folder. That's one common beginner mistake. So if we go into Pet Finder on the left here, you'll notice that you have a ready-made React app. So it's got a node modules folder, a public folder, a source folder. It initialized a Git repo. You got a package.json. If you're familiar with Express, then you should know that this is going to keep track of all of our dependencies and a lot of our configuration for our application. And then, of course, we're using TypeScript, so we're going to use a TypeScript compiler. If you're not familiar with TypeScript, I have a great tutorial on TypeScript so you can get up to speed. Okay, but you should be able to follow along during the introduction, especially. It's not too hard to do. So, well, we've got basically everything we need to get the React app started. We don't actually literally have to do much of anything except go into the source folder and actually write our React app. So inside the SRC or source folder, that's where you're going to put everything you need for your React app to make it what you want it to be. The public folder is more for static like images and things like that. So if you wanted to have those sorts of things in your application, you're going to put them here. And since this is a single page application, you'll notice that we have this index.html, all right? So that's going to be our base. And then lots of this other stuff, if you're a beginner, you don't really need to touch it at all. Okay, so like we'll like obviously add stuff inside the source folder, but the rest of it you can just kind of leave it the way it is, and you'll be perfectly fine. So go ahead and we're going to go into the Pet Finder folder, and then if you would like to start your React app, which you can just do npm start, and wait a minute for it to do all of its build magic. If all goes well, it should pop up a browser window in your default browser with a React symbol, a little animation, and there you go. So I'm running on port 3000 on localhost. So you've got your very own React app. Now, of course, we're going to have to actually like do something with it, but this is going to be a great way for you to be able to just kind of like play around with React a little bit and get it to work. All right, so the next step is we got to actually install some stuff. So we need some libraries outside of the core libraries that React normally uses because we need some extra functionality. So let's go ahead and install the libraries that we will need to create our Pet Adoption Center. So also, in case you were still running your React app from before, just hit Control-C in the terminal and hit yes, and that will terminate it so that you can use the terminal again. We need a number of different libraries in order for us to do things that are beyond the normal standard React package. So you notice package.json is all about listing our dependencies. So we're going to go ahead and install some. So we're going to do npm I, and then afterwards we're going to read Axios to do our API calls. We're going to use Json-Server for our backend. We're also going to use concurrently so that we can run the React app and the JSON server at the same time. And then we're also going to need React router DOM because we're going to be able to have to go from route to route. And we're also going to need the TypeScript, so we're going to need @types/React -router -DOM because we're using TypeScript and we need those types. And I think that should do it. Oh, we're also going to need Bootstrap for our UI because we're going to use the Bootstrap library to help us style the site. And we're going to use a library called React Bootstrap, which takes the Bootstrap library and makes it very React friendly. So this is a pretty decent amount of dependencies, so we're going to go ahead and hit enter to go ahead and install them. All right, everything goes smoothly. You should see those dependencies pop up in package.json, so that way we are going to have them available for us. The last thing we have to do for setup is we're going to put in scripts in the scripts section, so go ahead and find the scripts section, and we're going to put 2 commands. So scripts is basically like you want to do npm and then write a command in order for your app to do something. So I'm going to do npm server, so npm run server will run the JSON server, which we'll get into the next section about what that actually does. But JSON server is essentially going to be our API. It's going to be the place where we get our data from. That way we don't have to roll our own API. However, if you do want to roll your API, you can, but we're going to do it the easy way with JSON server. Then we're going to do npm run dev, which will take concurrently. What concurrently will do is it will run the JSON server and our React app at the same time because the React app needs the JSON server to be running in order for it to get any data. Okay, so again, we did server on the left side of your scripts and JSON-server, 2 hyphens watch, db.json, 2 hyphens port 3001. For dev, I did concurrently, and then 2 hyphens, kill hyphen others. That way, in case there's like some other process running in the way, we'll just get rid of it. And then notice I use slashes here, so it's slash npm run server and then slash npm run start with these 2 quotes at the end, just to make certain that we can properly escape characters. So this should be all you would need to get started. So we're going to first set up the backend with JSON server so that we actually have some data for the person to be able to see, because we actually need to get information about pets, like their name and things like that. And JSON server is really easy, so let's dive right into that. Alrighty dighty, let's get into the JSON server. So essentially we could roll our own API and have React consume that data. And if you'd like to do that, I actually have a video where I took 5 different frameworks, Ruby on Rails, Node.js, Fast API, etc. And I just decided to see which one had the better development experience. So if you have some time, go ahead and take a look at that video if you want to roll your own REST API. But for right now, we're just going to use the JSON server library because it's quick and easy and allows us to think more about React and less about the backend. So we already have the library installed, so in order to actually use it, it's very simple. Inside the root folder, so I'm in Pet Finder folder right now, I'm going to add a file called db.json. And what db.json is going to be is it's going to be the thing that holds all of our data in JSON format. So whenever we use our REST API, it will interact with this file to add data, remove data, update data, etc. So we don't have to worry about all of the different things you need to set up a real REST API. I'm going to go ahead and just paste some data I made, and I'm going to just show you how you can do it yourself. At the top, notice how I have this all in one object, so go ahead and put curly braces to indicate this is an object. And then inside of that, you have your resources. And so your resources are going to be like pets or adoption or whatever you want. So the API will be localhost port 3001/pets. For this resource, it will be localhost port 3001/adoptions. Okay, so you can name whatever you want. That will be the resource. Inside the resource, I have an array. And then I have a list of objects for all of my pets that I would like to show. And so let's go over the data a little bit. I have an ID, a name, an animal type, dog or cat, age, description, whether or not they're adopted, the image, so it says like dog1.jpg, the breed, whether or not they're a boy, and are they adopted or not. And so this will just follow the typical formatting for JSON, so everything that applies to JSON formatting will apply here. And so I just have some mock data. That way I am able to have some pets to show at the beginning. Okay, you can go to the GitHub repo and get this yourself if you'd like, or you could just put in your own data. All right, so just make sure you're following the format. So again, the outside is an object. Inside this object are the different resources, so it's treating them like properties. So the pets will be a resource, and then inside pets will be an array, which will have all of our different animals. To actually see this in action, we can actually run it. Notice way back when I had you guys put server in here, so we can do npm run server, and that will start JSON server. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Npm run server, and you should see it start up pretty quickly. So it's going to be localhost port 3001 adoptions and localhost port 3001 pets. And if we open up Postman, we can actually use it. So I'm going to go ahead and do localhost port 3001 pets. And notice how it works just like a regular REST API. We've got pets resource. I got all the pets in JSON format. I can even get pets by ID. So if I look for a pet by a specific ID, I can do 5. Awesome. And then if I want to like update a pet or delete a pet, I can use all of my HTTP verbs just like I would normally use. So this really like cuts down the time for us to worry about the API, because at the end of the day, I just need to be able to show all the pets, show the details of a specific pet, that sort of thing. So JSON server makes this really, really easy to get up and running. So again, we have our API here. And so when we start our React app, we will have the server running, and then we will also do our own thing. So get yourself set up with JSON server, make sure you have a db.json, and then open up Postman while it's running and try it out just so you can get used to it. All right, so now we've got our data. We need to actually have React consume the data, and we're actually going to start working with the actual React app. So I hope you guys are excited. We're going to dive right in. All right, one last little piece of setup before we get started is we're going to have an environment file. All right, so be sure you go to Pet Finder, the root folder, and we're going to add a file called .env. All right, and what .env basically does is it says that, like, hey, you're going to run React in different environments. Like, maybe you have a development environment, a UAT environment, or a force or production environment. And so you're going to have a .env file to be able to keep all of your, like, secrets and special configuration options out of the main area so that it doesn't find its way into source control, which you definitely do not want to find it there. Now, of course, you're going to see mine in the GitHub repo because I want you guys to be able to see an example of one. But here, what we need to do is we need to be able to basically say, like, hey, like, what is our endpoint for our API going to be so that React can actually hit the API. So what we're going to do, we're going to do React app, all caps, underscore API URL equals http://localhost port 3000. Okay, and then we'll put a slash at the end. And what this basically does, it says I'm going to show you how, like, this is going to be like a variable elsewhere in the app, but they need to begin with React app. That's just the way that it's set up. And so this is going to be a stand-in for this configuration that we're going to use for the API. It was 3001, I believe. There we go. And so we're going to use this later, but I wanted to set up an environment file so that way you'll have this. Inside the environment file, you'll commonly see like URLs for API endpoints and other pieces of configuration, and it's just a convenient way to have them all in one place. All right, now the cool thing about React is it does not tell you how to live your life. Like if you want to put everything inside the source folder, you could. I wouldn't recommend that as your app gets bigger and bigger, but you could. Like there's nothing stopping you. We're going to divide things up based on what they are. Again, your folder structure at your job may be different. They may have folders based on business domain, like they may have like accounting in one folder and I don't know, expenses in another folder, however they have it set up. They may do it that way. We're going to do it just based on what the file is because Pet Finder is not a huge app right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a folder inside the source folder and call it services. And what services are basically files that we're going to make. We're basically going to make a series of functionality that will, all its job is just to call the API and go get data. So in addition to services, we're also going to create another folder called models, all right? Because the model is going to represent the data we get back from the API. And we're going to use a TypeScript interface in order to do that. And again, if you're not up with TypeScript, I do have a 1-hour tutorial on TypeScript so that you can get up to speed. It will help, obviously, to know JavaScript, but I think you can still follow along. All right, so let's work on our model first. We're going to make a pet model, so we're going to do pet.ts. All right, and pet.ts is going to have all that data that we had from db.json. If you remember, we had like an ID, a name, an animal type, an age, description, etc. This interface is going to represent the shape of this object in terms of data. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put some code in here. So we can do export interface pet. All right, and then I believe ID is a number, name is a string. What else was there? There was an animal type. You can we only have dogs and cats right now, so we're going to do dog or cat. Okay, so you can pick one of the two. And then age is a number. Okay, in TypeScript, not according to the song. Description is a string. And then image is a string because the image is going to be a file with the name. Then we have breed for a string, and is boy is a boolean, and is adopted is a boolean. So again, TypeScript will need to actually say what type these things are, but there's our interface. That, again, this interface represents the data like a singular pet object that we have back in db.json. Okay, so we're good with here. So now we're going to go ahead and work on our service. All right, and so we're going to make a new file. We're just going to call it petservice.ts. All right, and again, there's something special about this. It's just essentially the way that we're organizing our code. Again, you could probably put this all in one gigantic file. I wouldn't recommend that, but you could. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, and this file is going to be responsible for retrieving data from the backend. So that JSON server we set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and do like const API URL equals process.env, okay, .react app URL. What I call it, I think API URL. If I go back to my environment, React app API URL, this is what I used. So we're going to go ahead and use that. Okay, and what that will do is that because we have this environment file, it will read this and be like, oh, cool, I can go to this environment file and get this value, because this value is where our API is. So that way we're able to configure it. And then we are able to also say like, hey, if that doesn't give you back anything, let's give you back a blank string. Okay, we know it will give us back something, but it needs to say like, hey, if I don't find this, what do I do? All right, now we're going to use Axios. Okay, Axios is a library that allows us to do basically HTTP verbs and React with like work with APIs in a very simple manner. So I'm going to go ahead and create a series of functions. It's going to represent each of the different CRUD functions. So remember, CRUD is create, read, update, delete. So we're going to be able to get pets by ID, update a pet, delete a pet, and create a pet. So those are all the different things that we're going to need to be able to do for our app. So let's do export const get pets. You call it get all pets. And we're going to make it asynchronous, all right? Because we are modern. We like asynchronous programming. So async. And we're just going to do this the first go around. We need to be able to have it so that the person can type it in a word. Like let's say they type in golden retriever and it gives it back golden retrievers. But they may or may not type in a search term. So you can think of it this way. The default is going to be that we just show them all the pets. Or they give us a search term and we give them all the pets whose name or breed goes with that search term. So since search term is not necessarily a given, we're going to make it optional. So I'm going to do search term. That's the name of my variable. I'm going to say it's optional and it's a string. So maybe they give it to me, maybe they don't. It returns a promise of an array of pets. All right, and then we're going to do arrow function, and then here we go. All right, so it will yell at me like, hey, what's a pet? I'll be like, dude, you can just go ahead and if you don't know how to do this, just hover over pet. It'll do quick fix, or you can do control dot and add the import. Okay, and so now it will be yelling at me for something different, saying that like, hey, you got to return an array of pets. I'm like, I'll get on it, TypeScript. No need to get on me about it. A promise, if you don't know, is a representation of a future value. I know that sounds like highfalutin, but basically what it means is like, hey, like this is asynchronous, meaning I don't know exactly when we're going to get all of these pets back from the database, but I promise that you will have them and you can go ahead and continue coding as if this is an actual value. So it's kind of a neat way of being able to do asynchronous programming because humans don't really like think like that. So inside we'll do let response. Okay, I'm just going to use this response variable kind of as a placeholder. And there's two options right here because we do if they can either give us a search term that they typed in or they don't give us any search term whatsoever. So we basically have two conditions. So if search term, so basically if it exists, otherwise do this. So we're going to have an if else because there's two options. Then we're going to say, okay, cool, response is equal to axios.get. So this is that Axios library. We're going to import it. This is asynchronous, so we're going to use this await keyword, all right? And then we're going to use axios.get, and we're going to use backticks because we're going to kind of take the API URL and like make one out of once you see it, you'll make sense. So we're going to put API URL here. So what you can think of is going to take the API URL from the .env file and stick that here where the variable is. Then we need a query string parameter, so we're going to do a question mark q equals, okay, because that's what JSON server expects, and then we're going to let them have the search term. So whatever search term they type in, that will be part of our query string parameter. All right, so that way we will be able to go ahead and do localhost port 3001 question mark q equals, and then whatever they typed in for their search term. And let's go ahead and import Axios to be able to do that. The other way is simpler because this way we don't have to actually like use a search term. There's no query string parameter because we just want to get all the pets. So all we have to do is axios.get and then we just do API URL. All right, and then at the end we are going to actually take the response and return it. And we're going to return response.data, all right, because that is part of the promise, as an array of pet. Okay, so that way the TypeScript is happy. It knows that it's getting back an array of pets. So let's go over the logic here. The person could either give us a search term if they're looking for a specific kind of pet, or like by name or by breed, or they don't. So that's why search term has this question mark here to indicate that it is an optional. Okay, so it's a string, and then this method will return a promise of an array of pets. So we say, okay, cool. If they give us a search term, then we're going to call the API using Axios. We're going to await because it's an asynchronous function. .get API URL question mark q equals search term. So that way search term is put into the, so it'll basically build the URL for us and then go ahead and hit it. If they did not give us a search term, then we don't need a query string parameter because we don't have one. We're just going to get all the pets and we're just going to hit the API and that'll be it. Either which way, we're going to return the response as an array of pets. one little small thing, up on line 4, I'm going to also do plus pets. Because the resource in .env is localhost port 3001, but notice how there's nothing after here. The pet service deals with the pet's resource, so I gotta make sure I put that resource here with no slash after it. That way I make certain that the endpoint is correct. So if we look at this, it will be localhost port 3001 slash pets question mark q equals search term, or it will be localhost port 3001 slash pets. Okay, either which will work depending on the situation. So now we're able to get all the pets. We want to also be able to get the pet by their ID. That's going to be fairly simple to do. We'll just go ahead and do export const get pet by ID is equal to async, because it's an asynchronous function. And then we need that ID from, because we actually need to know like what pet's ID do we get. And we're going to return a promise of a pet. Okay, a singular pet, not an array of pets. All right, we're going to use arrow function. And then in here, we're going to just go ahead and go do our response. So we can do const response equals await axios.get, and then we are going to go ahead and do some string interpolation. So we're going to do backticks, then we're going to do $API URL, okay, and then we're going to go ahead and do slash, and then we're going to put the ID into here. That way we can do slash ID, and then we're going to return a response. Okay, semicolon, and then we're going to do return response.data as pet. Right, so that way TypeScript knows that it can take the JSON and say, hey, cool, this is a pet. So now we've got our two basic things here, which is fantastic. Actually, this is probably all we'll need to get started. We'll add more to the service as we go along. But think of it this way. As you can see, the service is basically, its responsibility is go to the API, talk to the API, and get the data back. It does not have anything to do with rendering things to the screen or any of that stuff. So we haven't done anything of that yet, but I want to have something that we can actually show on the screen. So this will give us a good start. If we need more functionality in here, we can add it a bit later, but this is good enough to get started. All right, a little more setup before we can actually show something to the screen. I know you're chomping at the bit to see what this actually looks like, but we're going to actually need the images of the pets to be able to show on the screen. So static images, static basically meaning unchanging, any sort of static asset is going to go in the public folder. So we can go ahead and look there. And notice that you've got some stuff there already. You don't need to worry too much about it. What we're going to do is we're inside the public folder, we're going to create a folder called img. All right, and img is going to basically be where we store our images. Does it have to be called img? No, you can call it McGillicuddy for all I care. Okay, as long as you have something that's logical folder structure-wise to hold your images in. Now you're going to have to go ahead and put your images into the folder, and then I'm going to do that right now. I just went and copy and pasted some of my different JPGs. So here are all the different cute dog and kitty photos, as well as the Pet Finder logo. Right, and again, you can get these from GitHub, or you can make your own if you want to feel if you're feeling artistic. All right, but again, static assets are going to have to go into the public folder, so that way React knows where to look for them. Okay, so React is a little bit opinionated. It does tell you how to live your life in a couple different ways, but not too much. All right, now we're going to make a new folder inside of our source folder. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure it goes there, and we're going to call it components. And this is the heart of React. So React has a component-based architecture. So instead of, if you've ever written HTML back in the day, when I was a teenager, I used to make websites for churches. That was my first little business. I didn't have too many customers, but it was fun. But way back in the day, before React, before a lot of different things, we used to have these things called frames. And frames were a nightmare, but you had to use frames in order to do anything cool looking with your website. So frames sort of was a very clunky way of dividing the page into different zones, and then you could try to put different pieces of your website into different zones. So in this case, we're going to use components. Okay, React is based off components. You could think of a component like a little miniature website. That's the way I like to think of them. It's just a little miniature piece of your UI that runs all by its lonesome in its own little world. So if we look at our final product, we can see this as one big web page. So back in the day, we would have done this as one big web page. But with React, we can sort of break this down into smaller chunks and work with the smaller chunks. So for example, the top part up here, let me go ahead and annotate this to help you out. But the top part up here, we get it's like the header. Let's use red. Red sounds good. All right, the top part up here right, is the header. We'd like that to appear like all over the website, right? So we have the header component. Okay, so this will be its own component. Then in this outside part where we have all the pets, we will have another component that will list out the pets. So this whole section could be a component. And then inside that component, so we have the list, which is basically a display of all the pets that we have. I'm going to make this different color. Let's make it blue. Each individual pet will have its own card, and that will be its own component. So it's going to be like a pet card component that lives inside of the larger pet list component. So components can be inside other components. But by breaking it down into components, what we're allowed to do is we're allowed to just work on one piece of functionality at a time, and they can kind of all be in their own little zone. Now, at the end of the day, when we finally, from the user's perspective, this is all going to be HTML. So part of what React does is a single page application. What it does is it will take all your components, okay, and it will smush them together eventually into a singular HTML file, and then React will be able to display what you want it to display on the screen based on how you've arranged your components. So from the user's perspective, they'll never really know what components you have or how you organized it, but as a developer, you can sort of break down your UI into individual components, and the cool thing is we can reuse them. So for example, in our website, I can take this card and reuse it in different places, all right? And I can also, take it and maybe just change the CSS a little bit. So that way we have a bit of reusability. So components allow us to take the same component, reuse it. So if you think about it, all of these pet cards have a different pet in them. So I'm taking different pets and just putting information inside of the card component and then just reusing it over and over and over again. This is great for keeping in line with what's called do not repeat yourself, the drive principle, because I don't want to, have to create a card for every pet. Like a picture back in the day, before all the single page application stuff, you used to it was very difficult because you'd have to use JavaScript to figure this stuff out. Like, how many pets do I have? And I'm going to have to, for each pet, I'm going to have to go ahead and put all their information in. With static HTML, you can't really do this because static HTML just basically says you need to tell me everything up front. So with React, we can have a different amount of pets, and we can use a component and reuse the component and be able to put different pieces of information in it. Also, we can take the same component and put it anywhere else in the site we want. It's super flexible. All right, enough preaching. Let's actually get to some coding. All right, I'm back in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to go to my components, and I'm going to add new component. We're just going to work on the easiest one. We're going to call it header.tsx. Okay, .tsx is the ending for your components. All right, and I gave it a capital letter, a header, and this is going to be at the top. All right, now we're going to start off real simple. Okay, React is functional. What I mean by that is you're probably used to object-oriented programming, OOP, where everything is an object. So the page would be an object, and the objects would interact with one another. React, they decided, I think back in 2019, to go with a completely different paradigm called the functional programming paradigm, where everything's a function. All right, so literally these components are going to be functions. And the reason they went that way, among other things, was because they wanted some sort of testability and predictability. So when things are a function, functions have inputs and they have an output. So with React, literally, your function, which is your component, could have inputs, and the output is going to be the UI that the person sees. So for example, those pet cards that we saw, that was the output of the pet card function. It was displaying, here is the dog, and here is all of its information. So let's get started, and as we go along, I'll explain more in detail. So we're going to need to actually think of our component as a function. So I'm going to do export function header. Okay, just like this. So if you look at it, this looks like a normal JavaScript function. Except here, what you can do is you can do return, and inside this return, so inside these parentheses, you can do what's called JSX. Okay, so JSX is basically a way for us to take JavaScript and HTML and marry them together. Because remember, HTML by its lonesome doesn't do anything really dynamic. It just sits there and stares at you like a brick. So we need JavaScript to add some dynamism, right? Because again, we don't know how many pets are going to be in our database. There could be 10, there could be 10,000, right? We need some sort of basically way of putting JavaScript and HTML together. Let's do something simple for right now. We're just going to do a div, and we're going to call it class name equals header, and then put it here. Now you're wondering why on earth did we have class name instead of just class? Try taking the name out and see what happens. All right. The thing is, because this is JavaScript and HTML kind of married together, there's certain keywords that are already reserved for JavaScript that we don't want to have overlap. So if you like to add a class name to a div or another tag, you're going to have to add, say, use the term class name. All right, and that way TypeScript will stop yelling at you. All right, so that is one of those reserved keywords that we're going to have to use with JSX. We're going to use class name instead of class. There's some other things. I will point them out as they come along. But this is the basic component. There's something that doesn't do anything, doesn't show anything correctly, but inside we can actually start just doing normal HTML. Couple little rules. There has to be a root element. Okay, so HTML is kind of like a tree. Like if you know XML, you have tags inside of other tags inside of other tags. At the end of the day, there has to be one tag that everything else is inside of. So for example, I couldn't just do this. Okay, I couldn't start another div tag and start going down from here. JSX expressions must have one parent element. So anything I do has to be inside this tag. I don't have to even do a div. You could just do a blank one like this. I don't know why you would do that, but you could. So for example, I could just go like this. Let me get rid of all this other stuff. Okay, and that could be my root. That could be my root element. Typically, people do divs and then they'll give it a class name, which is the same name as the component. That's quite common, especially when you want to do things with CSS targeting. But again, the main idea here is that any HTML you do has to be inside this root element. The root element can be a lot of different things, like a div or like an empty placeholder, or maybe like a bootstrap kind of thing. But like whatever it is, there has to be one root element. Everything has to be in there. What I would like to do is I would like to actually take this and put it on my main page. So let's go ahead and just put some kind of placeholder here, like this is the header. Right, so that way you guys can see something to the screen. All right, so we have our component, but it will not actually display on our website just yet. So we have to go to our root component. Let's go to app.tsx. App.tsx is your root component. It is the parent to all other components. All of, like in this Matryoshka doll of components, this will be the one that all the other ones are contained in. So notice how it already has some stuff in it. This is all the stuff that you saw when you ran npm start back when we were able to get the React app going. It's got like class name and a logo and all the other good stuff. All right, so notice how you see that we have the root element div class name equals app. Let's get rid of all this other stuff because I don't want it. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually add our header component here. So all you have to do is you're going to do angle bracket header / and then here. And then we're going to have to go ahead and import it because it doesn't know what this is. And there you have it. You actually have put your first component inside of your root component. And again, the app is the root component. So now if we were able to start this, we're going to do npm start and wait a second to see what happens. Once it pops up, you should see this on your screen. It'll say this is the header. So this is the component we made with our header, and we have the little text show. Now the cool thing about components, remember I said that they are reusable. So if I wanted to do this multiple times, we could. All right, so cool thing is that this will always update when you make a change. It will always yell at you if you did something wrong too. So you don't have to constantly stop the React and start it. You can always just do this and you can go back and forth. So now notice how if I use the component multiple times, it will just copy it. So this is what I meant by reusability of components. I can take the same component, write it once, and then use it wherever I want to. All right, so now I think we get a little bit more about how components work, how we add them to other components, what the root component is. So let's go ahead and fill out the rest of the header in the next section. So our header is not super impressive. I like it to look a little bit better. So let's do a couple things. So first off, I'm going to just go ahead and get rid of what's inside here. We're going to start from the beginning. We're going to use the React Bootstrap library. And what React Bootstrap does is that it allows us to use Bootstrap styling and then to kind of fuse that with the way React likes to formulate things. So we can think of the different components in Bootstrap as React components that we're able to put them together. So we're able to sort of keep within the React way of writing things, but also to go ahead and use Bootstrap stuff. So let's go ahead and use a navbar. So I'm going to type navbar, and when I do that, it's not going to know what the heck this is. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick fix and add import from React Bootstrap. So now React Bootstrap, the library, has a component called navbar, and so now you'll notice that we are able to go ahead and use that. So in here, inside the component, we can set different things up. So for example, I like the background to be primary. And the reason that we can say BG equals primary is because the React Bootstrap navbar has this property BG, which we can then go ahead and set. And then we'll do expand equals large, and we'll do variant equals dark. Okay, and this is just things you can do on a navbar. If you need some help with Bootstrap, Bootstrap has a website you can go to and look at their components, so you can see the different kinds of things you can tweak. But they do have a navbar component, and instead of rolling out our own navbar, we're just going to go ahead and use theirs. All right, then I'm going to do container and make the container fluid so that it will be responsive. And again, it has no idea what a container is. So the cool thing with imports is because we're going to grab what we want from React Bootstrap, we can just keep adding them up here. Oops, not component, container. Here's what I want to do. All right, so again, we have container. Okay, that's another thing. And then we're going to do navbar brand. Navbar.brand, href equals slash. So we want when they click on the brand logo, we want them to be able to go back home. So by doing href here, we'll be able to do that. And now what we're going to do is we're going to actually add the image. So if you remember, back in the public folder, in their image folder, I had a pet finder logo.png. All right, so in HTML, you do image as a tag, source equals. All right, and here's a little bit of a trick. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to be able to put a string inside of here. So you could just do this, okay, where we go ahead and just put a string, and then we're going to do image slash petfinder logo.png. All right, now you're wondering to yourself, why the heck doesn't it have public in front of it? Well, that's because public is where static assets are kept. React already knows that, so if you put them in the right place, you won't have any problem. All right, and then let's change the width. We might change the width a little bit, as I don't know if it's going to be too big or not. Let's make it square, so width will equal 80, and we'll make that a string, and then height will equal 80. All right, and so notice how it yells at me a little bit. So you notice how it will. This is a string. Let's go ahead and make this a string. Do 80. Either which way. Now, you'll notice that what it tells us will do is it'll put these braces in here like this. Okay, so if you want to put a value in, like you just don't want to put a string, you can actually put the value in straight away like this. Okay, and that will work as well. Inside, like the way React does like the properties of your tag is you can do it normally like you would in HTML, or sometimes you'll have to put these curly braces to put the value in. I'm going to mix this up just so you can see like the different ways of doing it. All right, we have the navbar brand, and then we're going to do nav class name equals mx auto. All right, and again, we have to use class name, all right, not class, because class name is already class is taken, so we have to use this. I'm going to go ahead and import nav up top so it knows what the heck this is. Okay, and then we need to do a h1, and then what we'll do is class name is equal to text center text white. Okay, that's the way I want it to look. And I'll say help them find their forever homes. All right, this looks pretty cool. All right, so we're using React Bootstrap to kind of help us build this navbar, and let's take a look and see what it looks like so far. Right, so far we've got them help them find their forever homes, but notice that it doesn't really look like a navbar so far. All right, I got rid of the extra header component just so you know, but we need one more thing. We need to actually have the CSS styling from Bootstrap. So it did install React Bootstrap, but we need to add the styling, and that's pretty easy to do. Let's go back to our app. All we have to do is we're going to go over to app.css, or sorry, index.tsx, and if you notice, you're like, what the heck is this? See how they have the app component here, and it's covered in React.strict mode? This is basically like the root of your app, right? This is the thing that runs first. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically say like, hey, I want to have my Bootstrap styling. So we're going to do import bootstrap /dist/css/bootstrap.min.css. And we're putting it here because we want it to be available throughout the entire app. This is the root, this is the root thing, the core of your app. So when you put things in here, like styling, for example, it will spread all over. Because again, our root component here, app, is right here, so therefore it will spread out to everything. So now let's see how it looks now. All right, there we go. Now we added the bootstrap in. We have helped them find their forever homes. But I kind of don't like this font. This font is not really speaking to me. It doesn't say fun and friendly furry animals. Let's go ahead and add some styling. But I want to just add styling to this component. I don't want it for the whole thing. Let's go ahead and go back to our app. And what we're going to do is inside components, I'm going to make another folder called CSS. And we're going to have a file called header.css. All right. All right, let's do some CSS. So we'll do H1 because I want that header to look different. Then we'll do font-family. And then we'll do Chewy because this is a pet site. So Chewy makes sense. And I want it to be cursive. All right, so oops, it's one too many. There we go. So this will make H1 tags use the font family Chewy. Let's take a look. Okay, so no Chewy download. Okay, what we're going to have to do now is go into header, and then we're going to have to actually import the CSS files. We're going to import, and then we're going to do string, and then we're going to go ahead and find it. So components, CSS, and then we called it header.css. There we go. All right, I'll put my little semicolon, and so we have to actually import the CSS file in order for us to see it. And then there we go, help them find their forever home. So now we have, a font I think that best reflects a pet adoption agency. We were able to use React Bootstrap to help us use one of their pre-built components to make a nav bar. That way we have to go through that ourselves. We have an image, and just to kind of go over the code again, navbar, container, nav, all of this comes from that React Bootstrap library, which you can Google and look up their documentation. We were able to use an image source, and we were able to use the public folder without actually typing public because React knows that it keeps the static images and static assets in the public folder. So I did image/petfinder.png. And then from there, I kind of continued using this component strategy of making tags and just building out my HTML. So here, this is pretty simple. We don't have anything dynamic. I just use Flexbox and etc. And then was able to create a component that looks like this. So now it's across the top of the screen. We've got Pet Finder. And so now we can start building the rest of our application where we actually show pets. All right, so I know you're chomping at the bit to actually display all those cute little pets, but before we do that, we got to learn a little bit about hooks, and specifically the useState hook. So to explain it very simply, hooks are essentially pre-built pieces of functionality for us devs to do our work that we have to commonly do when we're doing front-end development. React used to be a object-oriented, class-based library, but now we're doing functional programming. So I will show you how that looks like. Let's do a little quick, very easy example. So let's go to the components folder. And again, this component we will not be using in our final product, but we're just going to use it to show you how things work. We're going to do counter.tsx. Remember, tsx indicates to React that, hey, this is a component. Export function counter. Okay, remember that components are functions. We're doing functional programming. Things are not objects, they are functions. So now we need to have state. And what state basically is data related to a component. State could be used in so many different ways, right? Like state could be this, used to hold information, display a person's biography. State could be like, hey, is this button supposed to be red or blue if it's turned off or on? State can be a lot of different things. The easiest way to understand state is my component has data that's attached to it. Then that data changing is going to change my display. Because that's why we're using React, because React is supposed to be able to very efficiently handle changes to the UI based on what the user does. So how do we actually set up state using hooks in React? Very simple. Const, and then we're going to do an array, and this array will set up our state. The first one's a variable, the second one's a method, and I'll show you how that works. Counter, set counter is equal to useState, this is the hook, and we're going to say that the state starts off at 0. Now, you can give a type if you'd like to, but we'll have TypeScript infer the type. So I'm going to go ahead and import the useState from React. And now you're like, okay, cool, but what does this do? So let's go ahead and return. We'll do div class name is equal to counter. Remember, we're using class name, not class, because we're using JSX. And then we'll just do a very simple p tag and say the counter is currently... And then we'll do squiggly braces, and to basically take a variable and intersperse it with your HTML, is very simple. You could use these squiggly braces and then just do the variable. All right, so whatever counter is, it will be displayed there. Let's head back over to app.tsx and let's go ahead and put this counter, all right, so that we can actually see it. You can leave the header up top if you want to. That's fine with me. So I want to go ahead and import it because it does not know what this is. All right, and that way we'll be able to play around with it. Now, again, react, we are reacting to things, but what this basically will do is we have a variable called counter. This is a variable that has a state, right? It's supposed to change. So counter is related to the component counter. This set counter is the method we will use to actually change the counter, probably make it go up or down. Then we're saying use state, so that React does all of its cool stuff it does with updating the UI based on the state. And then we set an initial state. We're basically saying counter starts off at 0. We could have just as well put 100 in here if that's what we wanted to do, but basically we're saying that the state of counter, or like the value of the variable counter, when this component comes to life, will be 0. So let's go ahead and run this and I'll show you what it looks like. Remember, you can just do npm start to start your React app, and here you'll see it says the counter is currently 0. So if I change that state variable, let's say I have it start off at like 110 or just something, whatever I feel like, after recompiles, notice now it says the counter is currently 110. So let's actually start using this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a button, and the idea is that when we click this button, this counter is going to change. So we'll put like button, and we'll do like click me. So now you're thinking, well, Jonathan, like, do I have to do like a jQuery kind of thing? No, React knows that you are probably going to click buttons and change things. So inside the button tag, we can use something that React gives us called onClick. Okay, onClick equals, and you'll notice that it will already give you the squiggly brackets. OnClick is an event, okay, that we're attaching to the button so that when we click it, it will do something. Okay, inside we can make a lambda. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lambda. It doesn't take any arguments in it, so I'm going to do parentheses, arrow, and now we're going to use this set counter method that we have here. So this set counter function, what it basically is responsible for is when it's run, you can actually do something to the variable counter. Remember, in functional programming, we don't mutate state, we replace things. We dump the old counter out and we bring in a new one. So we're going to use the set counter method, so set counter, and then inside, I would like to set the counter to whatever the counter currently is plus 1. So what I'm doing here is onClick says, cool, there's an event with the button. When you click the button, it should do something. What will it do? It will run this lambda. Okay, cool, we got this lambda. This lambda says run the set counter method, and then take the counter plus 1 and set the counter to whatever the counter is plus 1. So it will replace the old variable with the new one. So if we were to try this, okay, if you click, notice how the UI updates. Okay, so it will say I can keep going, and then it will always go up and up and up. And see how smooth that is? This is how, like, there's no full page refresh. The page is not refreshing every time I click the button. Just whenever I click the button, this one little piece of the UI is what changes, and that is the power of React. That is why people love React. So very, very smooth and buttery looking UI. All right, so now here is why I keep saying that we have to use that set counter method. Let's say I just made something. Let's say I did something else. Go ahead and do this little function. Let's do change counter. All right, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to change this from const to let just so we can play around with it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say when this function runs, we're going to take counter and it equals counter plus 1. All right, and so down here, we'll just run change counter. Should work, right? Okay, we have this counter variable, and then we're just going to set the counter up by 1. So let's head back to our UI. Notice how nothing happens. Even if I refresh it, literally nothing happens. I can click this from now until eternity, and nothing will happen. So the reason that nothing's happening is because the only way the UI will update is when you use the set counter method to change counter. Okay, set counter, this method is what triggers the UI update. That lets React know, hey, I should change the UI. So if I do set counter plus 1, because I am using this method and it was set up in the hook, this will trigger React to update the UI and nothing else. So now when I put it back, see how the counter works. We're going to use this to our advantage. We're going to have a state for the list of pets. Okay, then we're going to have a state just like that. And then we're going to use that and actually use that to make our app much more efficient. But the main thing with state is that state has two parts. First, you have the variable that holds the state, that holds the data that you're using to change the display of the component. Okay, so the point of state is that your component changes or changes what it displays based on your state. We then have a method that basically is paired with that piece of state. And that method is responsible for updating things. Whenever that state changes, our UI updates some kind of way. The method is the means by which that can happen. If we don't use the method, the UI will not update. We say useState. This is the hook that we get from React. And then inside the parentheses, we can put the initial state. So like, what is the value of that piece of data from the beginning? All right, now that we've got this kind of down, let's use state in our actual pet list component. So just to be clear, I got rid of the counter component. I got rid of it from app.tsx. I got rid of it itself, got rid of the import. That was just for displaying state. So let's think about how we're going to design our components for our actual pet adoption site. So if we think about it, we have to display a list of pets, but each pet's display is kind of the same thing over and over again, right? It's like image, name, breed, description, 2 buttons. And we just really want to fill it in with the individual pet's, information. So what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 components. And we have one component whose responsibility is to call the API and give it all the pets. All right, so that will be the container component, the pet list component. The individual pets display, I'm going to give that responsibility to a component called pet card. Pet card will not care about the API at all. All it will have to do is just say, okay, cool, you gave me the pet data I need to display things. I will display an individual pet. That way, first off, it's very flexible because that way we can display as many pets as there are in the API. If there are more pets in the API, then we display more pets. And then we don't have to write like HTML for each individual pet. What we can do is we can have one template, and then whatever like data the pet gives us back, we just slap it where it needs to go, and then we can call it a day. So we're going to have one outside component, which is our container component, which is going to be our pet list. The responsibility will be to actually grab the stuff from the database and fill our state in with the pets, and then each individual pet card, all its responsibility will be is just to display the pet with the image, as you see with marked in blue. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go get to it. In my components, I'm going to make a pet list component. Pet list.tsx. This is the container. Export function pet list. All right, so we know this is going to need a state to contain all the pets. So we're going to do const brackets pets set pets is equal to useState, and then inside useState we got to give it the type. We're going to say an array of pet, and the initial value is going to be a blank array because when the component comes to life, there won't it will have not called the API yet, so there won't be any pets when it first starts off. So we'll have to add the imports as necessary. And so just to make sure you understand, when the component first comes into being, it hasn't had time to call the APIs. When it comes into being, I just want to make certain that like, hey, the pets variable isn't like undefined or whatever. It's a blank array, because when the component comes to life, it makes sense. Like there aren't any pets in our array. All right, but now how are we actually going to like call the API and do all that stuff? We're going to use another hook. All right, this hook is called useEffect, and useEffect is very versatile but very easy to like misunderstand. Basically, useEffect that we used to have in the olden days with React, we had like component did mount. We had all of these things where basically said, okay, cool, React is kind of doing its thing, right? It's updating the component, it's destroying old things, bringing in new things, and we can sort of plug into these different little events that happen and do stuff. So, for example, I would like to be able to call the API when the component first comes into being. Right, so React is kind of its own little machine, and then every time it does certain things, I would like to be able to hook into it and say, okay, cool, this is what I would like to do when you hit this point. UseEffect is great when for example, we want to do things based on maybe state changes. In this case, I want to run the API call when the component first comes into being. So we're going to use the useEffect. So we're going to do useEffect, okay, and useEffect takes a lambda. So we're going to do lambda here, all right. And this is like, you could just have, this wouldn't do anything, right? We actually want to actually do something, all right? But what we're going to do is after this function here, we're going to do comma, and then we're going to put an empty array. What empty array does is it says, okay, cool. UseEffect has basically 2 parts. What do you want to do, and when do you want to do it? Okay, so that's the way I like to think about it. What do you want to do? Like, what code do you actually want to have run? And under what circumstances do you want said code to run? If I put like a blank thing here, like a blank array, what that basically means is I want this just to run like when the component renders, which will be basically when it first starts up, like, or if you refresh it. So when the component first comes into being, React does some stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. I would like for you to run this lambda when the component comes into being. So what do I want to do when the component comes into being? I want to call the API. So what I can do is I can call that get pets from my service. If we go back to the pet service.ts, you'll notice I have a get pets method, which this is all the logic to get the API. So the service has all that logic, so I don't really have to like worry about that from the component perspective. I just have to call it. So I'm going to do get pets, okay, and then do a parentheses, and then I'm going to use a promise because promises are thenable. So dot then. So basically, with a promise, it's like, hey, go call the API, and then when you're done, do this. Okay, so then once you take what we get back from the API, which is those array of pets, and then go ahead and set pets to that array. Okay, so I want you to go to the API and then say, okay, cool. Once you go to the API call, then take the pets you get back from the API and take this state, update the state, and set pets equal to the pets I get back from the API. And when do I want to do this? I want to do that whenever the component like first renders. Okay, which is basically what UseEffect does. So we're able to what do we want to do and when do we want to do it. Now, one issue is that you can't just do npm start and run JSON servers. What I'm going to do now is do npm run dev. That way, JSON server and React run at the same time because I need to actually be able to hit the API in order to get data. All right, so this is how it's going to be, but I do want to kind of show you the data. So we're just going to change set pets to console.log, and that's only because I wanted to show you like how this works. Then let's go down here and do return, and just to make it a div for right now. We're just going to do a blank div for our pet list. Let's head over to app.tsx, and then let's go ahead and add pet list. Okay, and then go ahead and import it. It will complain we got to go ahead and import it, and then that way we'll be able to see the data we get back. So if we head over here, go ahead and open up your console. I did that by hitting F12 or Control-Shift-I, but what you can see is in here we have the console, and we can see that we're getting back some data. If you look, this is the data we get back from the API call. So we have all the different animals, okay, Max, Bella, Charlie, okay, and so what UseEffect does, it says, cool, go, when the component is ready to go, then go ahead and run the get pets method. Get pets will call the API, get back an array of pets, and then we'll be able to take that array of pets and save it in the state. And that's what we're doing. Now, so far we haven't actually displayed anything yet, but I wanted to first show you that you are in fact getting this data back, and then we're going to take this data, and what you can think of is like each of these like JSON objects, we're going to have another component called pet card, and we're just going to like deal out like cards, like say, okay, cool, Max, you know over here, and then Bella over here, and the pet card component will take each one of these individual pets and display it to the screen with this data. All right, so how are we going to do that though? Because basically, if we think about it, we're in the pet list component. We need to take these individual pets and then give them off to another component, in which we can do that. So what we want is that inside of this pet list, so somewhere in here, we'd like to loop through all of our pets once we have them, and then take that pet data and hand it off to the card. So we can do that by using what's called props. And so I think once we do the pet card first, we'll be able to see how that works. So we're going to leave it like this. We have UseEffect, all right, and UseEffect allows us to do certain functionality based on what the component is doing. So for example, I would like to go ahead and run this this logic, okay, when the component is ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to set pets because we're going to use that later. All right. And so this can be whatever you want it to be. And then it will run. Okay. I'm putting a blank array, meaning I want to run when the component first starts. You don't have to have a blank array here. You can have a variable. You can say when this variable changes, then do this other thing. So UseEffect allows us to sort of like, hook in to what the component is doing and then kind of be like, okay, cool. If you're doing this, I want you to go ahead and do this. So we use a UseEffect to call the API. That's where our service came in. We put all of our API-related logic in our service. So that way our React app kind of has different files doing different things. Now the question is going to be, how are we going to get this data from this array of pets in this pets variable to another component. Well, let's first build the other component, and I think it'll be a lot clearer. So let's go ahead and do the pet card. All right, so let's keep this party train going. Let's go ahead and make a pet card component. So pet card.tsx. All right, and so this pet card, again, will have absolutely nothing to do with the API. All it does is expects from the outside world to get a pet, some information about the pet, and then display it. So export function pet card. All right, and we know it's going to have a pet as a state. All right, so like we're basically going to say like, hey, like it needs to get this pet from somewhere. Maybe it keeps the pet as a state. But the idea here is how is it going to get the information from pet list? Because pet list actually owns like the list of pets. Like pet list knows what pets are there because it got them from the API, but pet card doesn't have anything from the API. So it needs to basically get properties or props information from the outside world and take those props and bring it into itself. All right. So the props, again, this is back to functional programming. So again, this component is a function. It takes in information and then outputs information. So now we've been just doing like outputting information where we'll take the JSX and like spit it out to the screen. Now we need to actually bring in information. So actually it's fairly easy because again, we're using React, and React is a, well, some people would argue it's a library. It's definitely, I don't know if we call it a framework, but it does have a lot of built-in functionality. So for example, props, we can basically put a variable inside of the function and it will basically bring props from the outside world. But I want to build an interface first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an interface. And I'm going to call it pet card props. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't want anyone to just put any kind of data into this pet card. I want the data to be of a certain like predictable like pet. I don't want just a string or a number. I want a pet. So this interface says, okay, cool. The variable is going to be called pet and the type will be called pet. Right? We have to import the pet interface. That's no problem. All right. And so now the props or the information that comes from the outside world into this component is we're going to call it props. And we're going to say pet card props. So it is a variable called props. And what kind of variable is it? It is according to this interface. So now what's going to happen is the pet card is going to expect that it's going to get information, specifically an object that conforms to the pet interface. And from there, we can now go ahead and display our pet, which is pretty cool. So now inside, we're going to do return. All right. And then we can use that React Bootstrap again. So we're going to go ahead and do card. Because React Bootstrap has those cards, which we like to, they're very pretty, right? Remember, we're going to import card from React Bootstrap. And then let's go ahead and say, all right, we'll do card, and then we'll say like card.image. All right, so that way we'll be able to do the image of the card. Okay, cool. And then we'll move it over here, and we will say variant equals top, all right, because I want the card image at the top. And then we'll do source because it's an image. So we'll do image source is equal to, we have that in, we're going to use string interpolation actually. So what we'll do is we will use curly braces here and then do backticks. And then we're going to do image slash, because again, the image we get is actually based on the information we got in from the props, right? Because this, we don't know what pet this is. But we do know that because we're using the pet interface, we're able to go ahead and figure out like, hey, like, which pet is it based on the image URL. All right, so for example, we're going to do image slash, and then here's where the props come in. So now we can go ahead and do props dot pet dot, and then we can do image. See how like props contains the pet here, and that pet is what we can do to do the image. All right, so I don't want to necessarily have to do props.pet all the time. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of rework this a little bit. Okay, and I don't think state will really make much sense because, again, state is all about changing the UI based on changing data. This is just displaying whatever data it's given. So we can do props.pet. You probably also see some people will do like let pet equal props.pet and reuse that over and over again. I think it's fine either which way. You can just do it how you feel. I'll just continue doing it like this. So at the top, we're going to go ahead and show the image of the pet based on whatever the pet's image is. All right, and that will be good. Let me move the HTML around a little bit. And then we're going to do a card title, card.title, all right? And then we're going to basically just go ahead and use the pet's name and breed. So remember to take variables from JavaScript and be able to intersperse them in with the HTML, we're going to use curly braces to basically say, hey, Java, this is like, not Java, like, hey, React, this is actually going to be some JavaScript that we want you to run. So we'll do props.pet.name, and then after that we'll do props.pet.breed. Okay, so that way we know like, hey, this is the name of the pet and this is their breed. And then we can go ahead after the title. We'll need a description, so we can do so we'll do like card dot let's do body. Okay, the card body will contain props.pet.description. Okay, so that way that we know like, hey, like what's the pet about. And then let's go ahead and put some stuff at the bottom. So we'll have the description and then some buttons. Actually, let's take the card title and put it inside the body. I believe that's where it should go. Put it here. I'll indent it just so I like to indent things. And let's just put the buttons won't do anything right now. We'll have an adopt me button and a details button. They won't do anything right now. And then we'll make this button class name equals, we'll use button primary from Bootstrap. Okay, let's see, yep. And then we'll do class name equals button secondary, I guess. And we'll put a little bit of a margin on it, just to kind of make things look okay. All right, so this will be our pet card. So as you notice, there has nothing to do with the API. We're not calling data. We're not even saying state, because this card doesn't really change based on data. It's to just say, hey, here's data. Here's how it's shown. All right. So again, this is kind of the cool thing about React, is we're able to break our application down into smaller components, each with their own individual responsibility. This makes it a lot simpler, because when I'm building my pet card, I don't have to worry about the services or the API or even like where this is necessarily going to land, right? Like I don't need to know any of that. I just need to know like, hey, cool. The props is the information being passed down from the parent to the child, right? So the pet card is going to receive data from the outside world. I made an interface so that I can predict exactly what kind of data I'm going to get. Once I get it, I can just go ahead and use this variable and say props.pet.image, props.pet.breed, etc. and take that data and just put it inside the HTML where I want it to go. So now you're wondering, well, Jonathan, what do I actually do to put this data in here? Well, let's go up to pet list. And the thing we have to remember is that pet list is the container component. Pet list is the parent to pet card. So you can think of pet list as being the top component, and pet card will be inside of it. So therefore we say that pet list is the parent, pet card is the child. So in React, data flow, or basically taking data from one component to another, all right, there's different ways to do it. Props is when you want to take data from the parent to the child. So the data is flowing from the parent to the child. The data, I mean, is the pets that we have here. All right, so now let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. So I'll do class name is equal to pet list. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of React Bootstrap magic. Is I'm going to do row, okay, because each thing is basically rows and columns. All right, so we got row, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's say I want each pet to be, I don't know, 3 to it, 3 to a row, or maybe 4 to a row. We'll tweak it as we go. So we'll do, if I want 3, then I'll do column large equals 4. Okay, because I want large columns. I want them 4 units wide. Okay, there we go. And now what I'm going to do is, actually I'm going to change this around a little bit. So outside of this, what I'll do is, because we don't know how many pets we're going to get back. So what I want to do is, first off, I only want to do this if we're going to have pets on the screen. I mean, we have pets back from the API, right? Because if we don't have any pets back from the API, then there's no point in doing this. I also want to make certain that for every pet I get back from the API, I'm going to do a pet card. All right, and we can do that. That's actually a really cool way to do that in React. Because we're doing functional programming, I'm not going to use a for loop, all right? Because for loops have those variables we use for counters, like int I equals 0. Well, that I has to be mutated, okay, while the loop goes. So we're going to do a more of a declarative sense. I'm going to not loop through things. Okay, so again, we would like to show a pet card for every pet that's in our array of pets. So to do that, I'm going to first say, okay, cool. I'm going to put curly braces to indicate I am doing JavaScript. I am now doing JavaScript. Okay, cool, you're doing JavaScript. Well, what are you doing? I'm going to take pets, the variable, and use this map function. Okay, so what map does says go through go through every element in this array, and then whatever I tell you to map, I want you to map it. So it's going to go to the first thing, and then we'll take it, and then we'll map it. So map it basically means like pick it up, put it down like somewhere else. Pick it up, transform it, or do something with it, and then put it back down. All right, so what I want to do, I want to take each individual pet. All right, cool, you got each individual pet. What do you want to do with each individual pet? I would like to do the following. I'm going to put this here. Then inside of these parentheses, I'm going to actually put my little thing here. So I'm going to do column large equals 4. And the end. All right, so as you can see, inside the parentheses, I've actually got like HTML. So I'm using my React Bootstrap, but this is like HTML right in here. So what I'm saying is I'm going to write HTML for every pet in my array. So that is kind of the cool thing. React can like dynamically generate HTML based on every pet in my array. So again, pets is my variable that holds all my pets. I would like take those those pets, and for each one of them, I want to map them. Okay, I want to do a transformation. Take the data that currently exists in the pets array, and then at the first element, map it to this HTML. So I want to take the pet, put it inside of a column that's 4 units large, and then here's the magic. We're going to do pet card. Okay, so pet card allows us to actually use the component. So we got to import it, obviously. Now it's going to yell at you initially. Okay, and let's look at the error message. Property pet is missing in type object, but required in type pet card props. So because I have props here and it says I have this interface, pet card is basically saying, hey, you haven't actually given me the data I need to do my job. I need you to like tell me what the pet is. So I'm going to do pet. Again, why is it called pet? Because I named it in this interface over here in the pet car. This is named pet. I could have named it McGillicuddy. So pet is equal to, and then we're just going to do pet. Okay, so that will be the pet coming through. Notice how this variable pet it represents the pet at that point in the array. So remember, it will loop through the array, and every time it loops through the array, the current pet in the array will be this variable. Take that pet from the array and feed it into the pet card. Once it is fed into the pet card as props, it will then be able to display everything as it needs to. So as you can see, what we're able to do is we're able to loop through all the pets we get back from the API and generate HTML no matter how many there are. And then the pet card doesn't need to worry about all this like UseEffect and API stuff. All the pet card has to worry about is say, hey, give me the data from the parent, and then I can go ahead and display it. Right, we'll have to probably work with the image size, all right? So I'll show you some CSS for that. But the main point is notice how for every pet, we now have a pet card. And so each pet card, okay, shows us the image, the name of the pet, the description, all right? And we're able to see that, all right? So Lucy is a dachshund, Simba's a calico, Milo's a tabby. We'll have to adjust a couple things on the way it looks, but again, functionality-wise, we were able to show a card for every pet that's in our array. And so now we're kind of seeing the power of React. Let's kind of clean this up a little bit. To do that, I'm going to make a CSS. Let's call this petcard.css. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and change that image is a little bit too big. So what we'll do is .card image top, because that's going to be the class for the top of the image for Bootstrap. I'm going to say I want the width to be 100%. That's fine. It's a percent thing. There we go. And then I would like the height to be auto. Object fit cover. And let's make the max height 350 pixels. And again, I just picked that number because I thought it looked pretty. All right, so oops, I did not list CSS. There we go. All right, and then what we're going to do is we're going to import this inside the pet card. So we're going to do the import. Then we're going to go find our components /CSS / we call it petcard.css. All right, and that will be able to bring that in. So let's take a look and see how it was able to change things. All right, just a bit better. So we'll have to maybe work with making them a little more square, but as you notice, now we're able to take all of the different images and sort of standardize them, which looks a little bit nicer. Also, I need to put parentheses around the breed, so let's go ahead and do that. So if I go back, I'm going to put parentheses around it. So that way it's a little bit easier for people to read. Okay, let's take a look. All right, cool. Pitbull, Terrier mix. All right, so now you can see that we're able to display data, we're able to apply CSS styles, and we're able to have a container component and a child component and take data from the parent and pass it down to the child. So again, this props is what's doing it. Okay, props means you're taking data from the parent and putting it into the child. The data came from pet list when I made the API call, and I got all the pets from the API and put them in this pets variable. And then I use map to loop through all the pets. Remember, we're doing functional programming, so there's no for loops. So instead I do declarative. I'm going to use map, which means for each one of the elements in the array, what do you want me to do? I want you to take them, make a variable to hold the current pet in the array, and then write some HTML, okay, using that data. And here on pet card, I am actually giving it that information it needs to render. I'm saying pet, which is from the interface. Again, I had interface pet card props, pet of the type pet, and gave it the data it needed in order for it to display. And so now we have different components with different jobs doing different things, being able to render things nicely to the screen. All right, I'm in the pet card component. I do want to do a little bit of cleanup as far as the UI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these two buttons inside of a footer. So outside card body, I'm going to do card.footer, and then I'm going to put these two buttons there. So that way they're not like looking all raggedy. So if I look at my thing now, the buttons will be at the bottom, and it looks a little bit better of a presentation. All right, so let's talk about routing. So basically, React is a single page app, like for creating single page applications, right? So I don't want to go to different pages. I want to have one screen and have the UI react to what the user does. But sometimes we want to be able to route, meaning we want to basically take the user to some other view. And there's various reasons to do that. And we need what's called a router in React to be able to say, okay, cool. When they click on this details button, I would like to go to a details page. So it'll be localhost port 3000/details. Okay, so the URL is going to change. If someone goes to localhost port 3000/details, I don't want to show them this. I want to show them the specific like dog or cat that they're looking for when they click this details button. So we're going to have to do a little bit of setup to get all that to work. We're going to need to use React Router DOM, which we installed way back in the installation section. So let's head over to app.tsx. All right, so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take all of our components and place them in a router. And what that basically means is the router's job is basically to know like which component to serve based on the current URL that the person's looking at. So like I said, I wanted to go localhost port 3000/details, and the router will know, oh, you're at /details, cool, I'll show this component. So I'm going to wrap all my components in this router so that the router knows the existence of the components. So we're going to do router. All right, it's going to not know what that is at first. And so what we're going to do is we're going to import it. So quick fix. Okay, we're going to get from React Router DOM. I'm going to do a little bit of a switcheroo. I'm going to do browser router as router. All right. So what that does basically is it says, okay, cool, this browser router is the thing that is going to basically say, hey, I know what routers, I know what like components there are, I know what the routes they want, I can match two together. And I'm going to take my header and pet list and put it inside this router component. So as you can see, we can kind of put components inside other components. So router will now know the existence of header and pet lists, and will know the existence of other places, of some other components, and we'll be able to use that to our advantage to basically say, hey, when you go to /details, you're actually going to this other component. Now, how does it know that? There's another tag we can put in here. I'm going to do what's called route. Right? You'll have to import it, obviously, from React Router DOM. All right, so now route. Route is basically a component that says, okay, cool, here's the path, here's the element that goes with the component that goes with that path. Here's what I mean by that. Inside the route component, we're going to do path equals /. Okay, and then / is just home, right? And now it's like, okay, cool. When the user goes to /, what do we show them? the element that we're going to show them, and then inside you're going to put the actual component. So when they go home, they're going to see pet list. So we can take this original pet list off. So when the user goes to just slash, they will go see pet list. That makes sense, right? Because that's our home screen. Everything should still be working, except we forgot to put the routes inside routes. Okay, cool. So router, all right, is the main thing. Inside router, I forgot, we had to put routes. Okay, and import that so that it has a list of routes. And then we can take this individual route and put it inside here. All right, because not everything gets routed. Like, so for example, the header doesn't have a route. The header is just at the top of the screen the whole time. There isn't like a thing you type in to say, hey, I want to go to the header. Like the header's just at the top. All right, so now we should be good. So again, slash, this is the home page. So whenever they want to go to the home page, they will see the pet list component. All right, so what about pet details? Let's go ahead and add a route for pet details. I'm going to do a little indentation so it's a little easier to see. All right, we're going to do route. Now, the path, what I want is the details, but I also do need to know, like, hey, what's the ID of the pet? Like, I need to be able to show a specific pet, so I'm going to use that pet service get pet by ID function, but I'm going to need to know what the ID of the pet is. I can put that inside the URL. So the URL is going to be slash, slash details slash ID, all right? So slash details slash ID. So what we'll do is we'll do slash details. And then since the ID is variable, I'm going to put a colon in front of it. So colon ID. So what React knows, what React Router DOM knows to do is it says when it reads the URL, it says, okay, cool, localhost port 3000 slash details slash 50. It knows that the ID variable is 50. Okay, and then what we do, we're going to show another an element, and we're going to go ahead and actually make the pet details component. We don't have it right now, but I just kind of wanted to show you how the path was going to work. I'm going to go ahead and leave this out for right now. I just wanted to show you how the path was going to work. All right, we'll come back and put that back in. Let's go ahead and make that pet details component. All right, so let's go to the components, and then we will do pet details.tsx. Export function pet details. All right, now, we're not using props here, right? Because pet details is not a child of the pet list. Okay, so this is different than using when we did the pet card before. The pet card was able to take props. Okay, let me clear up some clutter. All right, but this, we're actually getting it from the URI parameter. We're going to do slash details slash ID. How do I grab that ID? Like, how do I actually know like what that number is? Well, we have a hook for that. We have something that React Router DOM gives us. It's called useParams. We're going to do let pet ID equal useParams ID. And we're going to have to import it. Okay, expected 0 arguments, but got 1. So let's go ahead and make the pet details component. So let's go into components, pet details.tsx, export function pet details. Okay, this is basic stuff we've been doing. But now, how do we capture that ID from the URI? Right, it's going to be slash details slash some number. How do we grab that so that way we can go ahead and ask the API like, hey, I want pet ID number 5, for example. Well, we don't use props because pet details is not a child of anything. Pet details is its own component. It's not in a relationship with another component. So it's single. So how are we gonna like put data into it? Well, we can grab that ID from the URL. Remember, it's slash details slash some number. So we can use a hook called useParams. So we're going to type const ID is equal to useParams. Right? And what this will do is it will look for the ID. And the reason, remember I did that colon ID? That's how it will know, okay, based on this name, that is what it's getting. All right? So now it will grab it from the route. And now I can have a state for pet details, because what pet details is going to do is it's going to take this ID, use the get pet by ID in the pet service to call the API, get back a pet, and then display the pet. So we'll need a state. So we'll do const pet set pet is equal to useState pet. Okay, and then we're going to have to go ahead and import everything. Okay, now a little thing here is that we're going to use the union because when this do null, because when pet details first comes into existence, it will have not called the API just yet. Meaning when pet details first springs into life, it doesn't, the state, the pet isn't loaded yet. So when the pet is not loaded, we're going to say the pet is null. So I'm going to use the TypeScript union to basically say useState could either be a pet or it could be null. Again, if you would like to review TypeScript, I do have a tutorial on TypeScript that goes over into all these little details. Now we can use useEffect. And useEffect is great because what I'm saying is that when we finally get this ID, I want to do something. So remember, the ID, the ID does not like instantly get set the second we get to the page. There's a little bit of lag time. All right, so useEffect, and this time inside the brackets I'm going to put ID. So I want useEffect to run when the ID changes. Okay, meaning it will go from nothingness into something. So then for useEffect will actually run. I don't want useEffect to run it when the page loads because there's a chance I don't have the ID yet. So if ID does not equal undefined, meaning I have it. Okay, so we do this check to basically say like, hey TypeScript, like I know I've got the ID. It's not going to run this code unless it is. So get pet by ID. Notice I put the ID in here, and then then. We'll do pet arrow. Then we'll do set pet. Okay, like this. Oh, missing some pet. Cool. Right. Angry me about pet. We'll have to go ahead and quick fix. So add the import from the pet service. And then ID is not a string, so we will have to cast this as a number. All right, there we go. Get pet by ID number dot then pet equals set pet. So it will run this when the ID changes. Now, what do we do with this like pet variable? Well, we want to actually display the pet, so we can do that. So we can put that here. We'll say its class name is equal to pet details. All right, and then inside we're going to actually display the pet. Now, there's going to be a moment in time where the pet isn't loaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called conditional rendering. What does that mean? I only want to display things under certain circumstances. So in this case, I only want to have the HTML be displayed if a pet has been loaded. So basically, if this pet variable isn't null. So in order to do that, there's a little syntax you use in React. So I'm going to do curly braces saying, hey, I'm doing JavaScript. Pet and then after that, I will do my HTML. What the heck is up with this? This is kind of a little bit of a hack. So basically what I'm saying is that both of these are true. Well, the right side, like this and checks to see if like both sides are true. And if they're both true, then it will do it. Well, the right side is automatically true because it's just JSX. It's just HTML. It's not actually conditional. This side is checking to see if pet is null or not. So if pet is null, this will result in false and nothing will get rendered to the screen. But if pet has a value, meaning it's been set during the useEffect stage, then you'll see something actually come out to the screen, which is kind of amazing. And so what we could do here is we could actually go ahead and make our pet details. All right, so just to also let you know, this works the same way as it does for the outside, meaning that after you use this and, the JSX here has to have one root element. You can't have like two side by side. You can't have like siblings. You have to have one root element. So everything has to go inside here. You can have blank if you want. You can have a div. I'll just leave it like, I'll make it like, let's say a card. Okay, or maybe let's do a row. And then inside the row, I'm going to just clean this up a little bit. We'll go ahead and import that from Bootstrap. Okay, that way we're able to use that to our advantage. And then inside the row, I don't want it to like take the whole screen, so I'm going to leave some room in the beginning and end. So I will do column and then go ahead and import that. And then we'll do it at the end. And in the middle, because there's 8 left, we'll do 8. Okay, and this is where we'll actually go ahead and display the pet. We can do, in fact, honestly speaking, we can just do a card. And then do card.body. And then go ahead and import all this stuff. There's a lot. The only thing with React Bootstrap, you have to import a lot of things. It can be a little bit annoying. Car.title, which will be the pet's name, right? So we can go ahead and use pet.name. Okay, and again, where that variable come from, it's our state. Okay, the pet, and we know that none of this is going to be shown until that pet is loaded, which is nice. All right, so we did car.title, and then we can just go ahead and add some more stuff, like maybe like the text. So like car.text, for example, and then we could say like the pet's breed, and then maybe on the next line, the pet's description. Okay, but now we come to an interesting problem, because I would like to display whether or not the pet is a boy or a girl, and I'm not going to know that from the outset. So I need to have some way in order to conditionally render whether or not the pet is a boy or a girl. So I can do that. Actually, it's pretty easy in React. What we're going to do is, after pet breed, I'm going to do a hyphen here, and then we're going to do some more JSX. So we're going to do, obviously we're going to do our curly braces. Now, on the left side, we'll do pet.isBoy. That's a Boolean, remember? So either it's true or false. We're going to use a ternary operator. A ternary operator looks on the left side and says, hey, are you true or false? If you're true, I'll do the first thing. If you're false, I'll do the second thing. We use a question mark to say like, hey, this is a ternary operator. We want to look at whether or not the left side is true or false. If the left side is true, then what we will do is we will display boy. Otherwise, we will display girl. Let's go through this again. Pet.isBoy is true or false. If it is true, then we're going to do boy. If it is false, we will do girl. The question mark lets us know like, hey, we're doing a ternary operator. The left side is the true case. The right side is the false case. So now we were able to see like, hey, if it's a girl or a boy, we'll show something different. All right, so now we've got our details, and it didn't take too long to do. So now let's head back to app.tsx, and let's actually go to it. So we're going to do route path is equal to /details/:ID, like we did before. And now we can do the element part. Element equals, and we'll do, what was it called? Pet details. Okay, I can't find that name. It has no idea what I'm talking about. So we will import it so it knows. And voila, we've got pet details. Now we're almost done. We got one more thing to do. We're going to head over to pet list. And pet list, actually pet card, excuse me. We're going to do pet card because that's where the button is. Now remember, we wanted to click the details button, and we want to be able to like go to the details page. All right, that's fine. So we're going to change this button around a bit. Instead of doing button, we're going to get rid of it. And we're going to use React Router DOM. And what React Router DOM gives us is this link helper here. So what link allows us to do is say, hey, when you click this, go here. So link to, okay, where do you want to go to when I click on it? I would like for you to go to /details/ and then what we're going to do is we're going to put the ID of the pet here, pet.id. Okay, that allows us to go to wherever. So we probably will have to go ahead and import this because it has no idea what this is. All right, and so that's fine. And then we do props.pet, props.pet.id. All right, so we'll get the ID of the pet, whatever that happens to be, and we'll go to /details/props.petID. And then I want this to look like a button, so I'm going to do class name is equal to button secondary margin left 2. And then we'll put details in between the two link. So now we'll be able to look like a button, and then when we click it, we'll be able to go over to the details. All right, so again, link comes from React Router DOM. It has a property called to equals squiggly braces, and then you need to tell it where to go when you want to click. In this case, I want to go to /details/props.petID. Okay, and if once they click on it, they'll be able to go there. So let's test it out and see if it works. Let's moment of truth. Right, here's my main page. Let's say I want to go to Max. I want to click on details, and it goes to localhost port 3000 /details/1. We have Max. We got to put an image in here. That's fine. We'll put an image in here real quick. All right, to accomplish that, what I will do is I will make a row inside of the card body, and then I will have a column about, I don't know, size 4. We can always change it later. And then that will contain the image. And then I'll make another column large for the rest of it. So it'll be size 8 because it has to add up to 12. I will take all of this card text, etc., and put that in the right-hand column. And then I will put, indent this a little bit. The inside of the smaller column, I'll do image source is equal to image slash, and then we can go ahead. Actually, we need to do string interpolation. So I'm going to use the squiggly braces, backtick. We can do image slash and then dollar sign squiggly braces pet dot image. Right, so that will, we need to actually see the dog in order to want to adopt it. Right, so let's give that a shot. We'll have to adjust a little bit. Oops, I forgot to put a slash in front of it. So slash image slash pet image. Let's go back and take a look. All right, there we go. So there's Max, and now we have a details page where we can see more about Max. Now, you might be thinking, why couldn't we just reuse the pet card? We totally could have. If you want the details to look a little bit different, or you want to have more information, you can have your own details page. That's why I did it this way. But the card could have been totally 100% reused. Now, if we go back to click here, we go back to the home screen. So now our app looks like a real web page. We're able to hit details and go to details about that particular dog. When we hit the logo, we go back to the home screen. That's what routing does. Let's review. There's a lot of moving parts to this. In the root component app.tsx, I added the browser router as router from React Router DOM. In order for the React Router DOM to know, hey, this route goes with this component, I had to first wrap the whole thing in a router, meaning I had to put all the components inside this router component. And then for every basically matching thing where I say, okay, cool, this route goes with this component, you put them in routes and you have each individual route. So here, this route, the path is just blank, meaning it's the home screen. Which element goes with it? Pet list. This path says /details, and I use this :ID to basically say, hey, this is a variable. Like it could be 5, it could be 10, I'm not sure what it is. It's a variable. And that matches with the pet details component. So the pet details component here, we use params to grab the ID from the URL. I called it ID because here I said :ID, so it's going to look for that. So I did constant ID equals use params, and then I'm going to let React Router DOM handle all that. I then will use a state to handle the pet that we're going to display, so that the state of the component will be the pet. I did UseEffect. The difference with UseEffect is I waited till the ID changed, or some change happened with this variable ID, and then I use my function from my service to get the pet by a specific ID. So this is very similar to the pet list, except I'm doing a different method called get pets by ID. Then once I did that, I was able to say, okay, cool, I can make a pet. I only want to display the pet, though, when the pet's loaded from the API. There's going to be a little bit of time between the component coming into existence and getting the response back from the API. There's a little bit of time there. So I'm going to use conditional rendering to say, hey, cool, if the pet is not null, and this is a little trick, right? Because the other side is always going to evaluate the true. So this way is basically saying if the pet is not null, then display this is the way I would think about this. Okay, the other thing we learned was using ternary operators. So pet.isBoy, question mark. So this says, cool, is this true or false? If the left side of the question mark is true or false, do the first thing. Else, which is what this colon means, do the other thing. So if it's a boy, we'll say boy. If it's not a boy, we'll say girl. All right, and that way we're able to kind of change what we're displaying to the screen based on the value of the variable. Last but not least, and those is a ton, we go back to pet card. In order for us to be able to click the button and have it route to somewhere else, we use this link. Okay, link has a two properties, there's two equals, and then we're able to say, okay, /details/ and then we took the ID of the pet, and then when the person clicks on this, it will route them to /details/ props.petID. So obviously routing, there's way more to it than what I've shown you, but this is the basics of it, and this will get you pretty far. So now we have pet details, so when the person clicks on the button, they go to pet details. Last but not least, we need that form, and the form is going to make prodigious use of state. So hopefully you can take some time to review everything we've done, maybe tweak some things, add some pets. Okay, we're going to head over into dealing with forms in React. All right, home stretch. So the last piece is this adopt me button. So what we would like to do is when we click adopt me, it will go to a form and we'd fill out the form and then we'd be able to adopt the pet. So in order to do that, there's a couple pieces we're going to have to put together. So we're going to have to first off have somewhere for this data to go. So we could put it into our REST API. But for right now, what I want to do is build the form, fill out the form, be able to click submit, and then be able to capture all that data. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to first start with building the form. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's head back into our components, and then let's do a pet adoption form. Adoption form.tsx. Now, forms in React can be pretty hefty, so let's wear this for the long run though. So pet adoption form, right? We know how to do a basic component by this point. Now, we do need to have the pet in question because we want to know at the very least the ID of the pet. We may want to include their name. We can go ahead and grab the pet. So we're going to have a state to hold the pet that we want to adopt. And this looks very similar to what we did before where we grabbed the pet from the pet details. So I'm going to actually go ahead and use a lot of that code. All right, so pet, and then it could be null. All right, so the pet will start off as null. And we'll do our imports because we're going to need to know the useState hook. And we're going to go ahead and bring in the pet. I'm also going to go ahead and do the useEffect. Remember, useEffect has a function, and then when do you want the function to be carried out? So we're going to go ahead and do get pet by ID. So by ID. And oops, I forgot to actually do the use params. We're going to get the ID from the route. So we're going to do const ID equals use params. My apologies. Okay, remember we did this from the details. Basically, this is the same as the details. So we're going to go ahead and do if ID does not equal undefined. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and do get pet by ID, number ID, because the ID comes in as a string. Dot then pet arrow set pet to the pet. All right, and then we will do this when when the ID changes. So that is just to like load the pet, right? So that we actually have the pet in question. If we want to do something on the form, we can do it. All right, now you must be wondering about the form. So let's actually look at the HTML for the form first. So I'll do return div class name is equal to pet adoption form. All right, so we're going to use the React Bootstrap to make a form. So we're going to use a form tag because it's a form. And of course, we're going to have to do a lot of imports. No big deal. Okay, one thing, there is a form for React Router DOM. So be careful when you're doing your imports. We don't want it from React Router DOM. We want from React Bootstrap. Okay, so notice how up here is this import form from React Bootstrap. Just keep watch because it might do form from React Router DOM. We don't want that one. All right, so we've got our form, and now we're going to start filling in. Like we need all those different fields that the person's going to fill out. So we're going to do form.group because it's a form group, and I'll say its control ID is first name because we're going to ask the person for their first name. All right, and then we'll do a label, form.label, first name. All right, and then what we can do is we can do a form control. So form.control. So that's the thing that the person's actually going to like type in. And here we can actually like, I actually don't want to do this. I'll do it with the ending tag like this. Now we can say its type is text because people are going to type in there. The name is first name. The value is equal to, well, this part's interesting because we need to actually think of how we're going to handle this. So I'll do value in a second, and then we'll just put required. All right, we've got a form, okay, and we can go ahead and have the person get to this form, okay, based on them clicking something. So we could have a route for this. Let's actually add a route while we're at it. So let's go ahead and add a route. Let's go to our app.tsx. We're doing a lot of setup right now, so once we get the setup, we'll be able to see how this works. Okay, path is adoptions/ID, element equals, and then we will do pet adoption form. All right, so when they click on, when they go to adoption/ID, they'll go to the adoption form for that specific pet. And then on the card, we're going to go ahead and just basically do the same thing as this. I'm going to just go ahead and copy and change a few things. All right, so we're going to do so we're going to do, it said, what would I call it? Adoptions. Okay, and then we're going to make this button primary, so that way it kind of stands out. All right, and we're going to say adopt me. All right, so let's go ahead and check our page. We made a lot of changes, so let's hit adopt me. All right, and we have our form with the first name on it, so it stretches all the way across. We're going to fix the CSS, but we wanted to hook all those things up first, so that way we can work on this form. All right, now let's close this other stuff out. Now that we've got the setup going, now we can fully focus on the form. Okay, we have the form control, which is the input, which means the person's going to like type something in here. So how do we actually, like, what do we do with that? Typically what you do is you'd have a state, all right? So what we could do is we could have that form field be linked to a state. And that makes sense because what we could do is we can do const first name, set first name, equals useState. It's a string. Okay, and we can say the initial state is blank. Okay, it's blank. So now what we're saying is that this component has a state called first name, and it starts off as blank, and we can link that to this form control. So what we're going to do is what we would like is when someone types in this form control to update this variable first name. So if they type in like a T, then first name becomes T, then they put like O, and then first name becomes TO. So like as they type, whatever they type gets saved in that state. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. First off, we're going to kind of like link this form control, this input, to the state. So I'm going to use value is equal to, and then we'll just do first name. Okay, that way they're linked to each other. Now we're going to have that event. Now before we use on click with buttons, but with like input fields, we can just do on change. Okay, so on change equals, and that will be like when someone types, that means it's changed the value of the input. So now inside here we could put a lambda. So we're going to do a lambda. This time though, I am going to pass in E, and what E stands for is that event. So if you know anything about JavaScript and the DOM, you know that when someone does something on the DOM, meaning the document object model, when someone interacts with the website, an event object is raised, meaning that what JavaScript, what the DOM does, like the API says, okay, cool, a user did something, I'm going to store the information about what the user did in this event. So in order to have us get access to that, we're going to use E, all right? And then after that, we can, from the event, we can grab like what they typed. So I can do set first name, which is, again, we're using that the function for the state, and we're going to do e.target.value. So that way, anytime they like type anything into this first name field, it's going to update. All right, let's also, while we're at it, go ahead and do a little bit of styling. So I don't want it to take up the whole screen like it was doing. So I'll make it take up like the middle part. So I'll do 2 columns on the edges. That's 6, and then I'll do 1 in the middle. Oops, forgot to do a row. So let's do row first. Okay, and then we'll need to know what row is. Okay, and then we'll do a column. Large equals, I guess, 3. Okay, and then it doesn't know what a column is, so we'll have to import that. And then the middle one, which will be large, which I'll say maybe it's like 6. Well, we can always like make it look different. Towards the end equals 3. All right, I'm just using the grid system from Bootstrap in order to place things on the screen. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of move everything around because I'm persnickety about the way things look on the screen. And we can go back to our form. All right, there we got first name. All right, and so as I like type into this, I can it will update the variable. So I'm going to add a little bit of debug code just to kind of show you that like that's actually working. So let's add a p tag. We're going to remove this in a second, but basically the value of first name is, and we'll put first name inside squiggly brackets. That way, as we type, we'll see it kind of update. So I will do like, see as I type. So whenever I type, that onChange event is being fired. It will take the onChange event, grab the value, and set the first name, the state, to Jonathan, or whatever I type. So at first it becomes J, then J-O, then J-O-N, and as you can see, the state is holding what the person is typing into this form field, which is amazing. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a bunch of, we're going to create a form, and then for each one of these, we're going to have that onChange and basically link the form field to the state. Now, what we could do is we could have one state for every single thing we're going to have in this form, and that's going to be a lot of things. I can show you a much nicer, cleaner way of doing that, which will involve be a little bit more advanced, but I think it might work. Because there's so many fields, I just don't want to have like 10, things, different pieces of state. It's just so much typing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an interface. I'm going to say interface, and I'm going to call it adoption form. All right, and this is going to represent my form. So this is going to have everything in my form. So I'm going to go ahead and put those values in. So I just went ahead and filled them in. Now the adoption form has a first name, a middle name, a last name, has fenced yard, has children, has other pets, phone number, email, and about self. You'll probably want to just go ahead and pause the video so that you can type this all out. Okay, don't try to go as fast as me. I take some time to type things out myself. So just pause the video and go ahead and do that. All right, so why do we have this? This is going to basically represent all the different values in our form. So instead of having this state where we have like one state for each first name, last name, etc., we're going to have one state for the entire form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do constant form values and do set form values is equal to useState. I'm going to go ahead and use that, what would I call it? The adoption form interface, adoption form interface, right? And that will be, and I can set some initial values. Right, so the initial state, and then I'm going to go ahead and type out all the initial values. So I went ahead and went through, I made an object, so there's curly braces here, and then I just did all the properties that I set up here and give them default values. This is a lot easier than trying to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 states. So you do useState 9 times. That would be very, very, very mind-numbing. Wasn't looking forward to doing that. Now, right now we have the onChange. When the person types something, it has set first name. I'm going to get rid of that for right now. I just had all that. I had that there initially just to kind of show you how it worked. Let's get rid of that. There we go. And then what I like to go, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the other state because we don't need it anymore. All right, so we're just going to use form values, set form values. And the next thing I'm going to do is I need to have a method or a function so that when the person, let's get rid of this line too while we're at it. When the person types something into it, it will basically say hey, what is the name of the input that they're currently typing something into? I'll go update that one. Right? So instead of having 10 different states, what it will do is we'll cycle through everything and be oh, this one is first name. I'll go update first name. Oh, this one has fenced yard. I'll go update that. I would prefer that to try and have 10 different states. So we'll do const handle change is equal to. Now this is where I feel TypeScript is kind of annoying when trying to work with React, and I'm just being honest about it because you need to know the types of things. In JavaScript, I could just put E here and that would be fine, but TypeScript wants to know what E is. We're going to take in the event. Remember that event that we were doing before, the e.target.value, that event that is raised when someone does something on the website? Well, TypeScript demands that we know its type, and I just don't know how you would cyclically know this, but it is react.change event and then HTML input element. And the way you would know that is looking it up, in all honesty. Or it could be an HTML text area element. Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to use that for when we do the text area when the person says why they should be allowed to adopt the dog. All right, so, we need an arrow after this because it's a lambda. Great. All right, now handle change. What are we going to do? First off, we're going to do some destructuring. So basically, I have an object that has information inside of it. I want to pick out the parts I want and put them in this other object and leave everything else aside. So const name, value, and type is equal to e.target. So I'm getting the name, the value, and the type from e.target. All right, TypeScript does not know that HTML text area element will have this. So let's get rid of this union. Okay, cool. So HTML input change event will definitely have a target. All right, so this is where I think TypeScript can be a little bit. All right, so we have two kinds of things going on. So first off, what we're going to do is we do have checkboxes. We'll handle those in a second. But what we can do is we can say, okay, cool. What I would like to do is set the form values. So remember, a form value is an object. Okay, it is an object that conforms to this interface. And again, if you are a little bit unfamiliar with TypeScript, I do have a tutorial on TypeScript that goes over interfaces and what they mean. But basically, useState has an object. This object has these properties. So what I want to do is I want to say, okay, cool, I want to set the form values. Okay, cool. How are you going to set the form values? I'm going to do previous, okay, arrow, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically say update all the values. So take all the current values in there. This is the spread operator. So the spread operator basically just says fill in everything for me. Go through every property, fill everything in for me. But for the one property that matches the name of the target, then I want you to put in its value. I'll explain that again. This is the spread operator. This says fill everything in that's already in there. So take the form, take the values, and fill everything in there except this is the target. The target actually knows which form it was clicked. Was it the first name? Was it the last name? Okay, whatever one was clicked and the person did changed it, take that one and update the value. Everything else can stay the same. That's kind of the way you can read this. All right, and this is a much cleaner way of, in my opinion, of writing this because again, you could have 10 pieces of state and then do all that. This will just basically say whatever they type in, I'll get their name and fill it in. As long as it fits this interface, you should be fine. So now let's refactor this form control. So now its value is equal to the form control. What do I call it up here? Form values. Okay, it's going to be equal to form values, dot first name. All right, because we're using that object to represent all the different form fields. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to say on change is equal to squiggly brackets. And now we're going to go ahead and use this what we just made. So we can go ahead and use handle change. We can even just put handle change inside here. And just pass the function off to on change, and that way it will be able to know hey, because it will look at the name, right? So here's the thing about the event, right? Just again, this may be a little complicated. This event that is being raised, it records when you type into this form control, it knows that the name of the form control that you typed in. So notice how it says first name here. So that's what this variable will be, first name. So that's how this is working. What we'll do is say, okay, cool, grab the name and the value, basically what the person typed in, go through all of these different values. If they're not touched, just leave them as they are. Just fill everything else in with what's already there. But for the name, which again is grabbed from here, first name, set to the new value. That way you're able to essentially ignore the ones that haven't changed and only change the one you're looking for. So this, I didn't write as many lines of code because I don't want to write use state and set state and all the other stuff. I'm going to basically do this for every last one of my inputs, just put on change equals handle change. And that way it'd be a lot easier for me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and do some typing and put some of the rest of the form fields in. Okay, so a lot of typing later, I have put some new stuff in here. All right, so you'll notice we have the form at the top, and I did a lot of typing. So again, we have this on GitHub, so you can take a look. You can try to keep it simple, but essentially everything's a form group with a form label and a form control. So I have the value is form values dot, then whatever the property is, last name, first name, and then on change equals handle change. So we have first name, middle name, last name, phone number. Cool thing you can do this is more HTML, is you can use this pattern and you can use regex. I got some regex for a phone number. You can use that for validation. And then I also have one for email. So pattern equals, and you put some regex, and that will check to see to make certain that they are, putting something at something.com. Okay, but the main thing is that the onChange, see how the onChange is the same for all of them? That way I don't have to do onChange set email, onChange set phone number. Like that would be very, very monotonous. Instead, I can just do onChange equals handle change and for all of them, and then we're done. All right, I've got a text area for about yourself, and then a checkbox for like do you have children and other pets? And I also used this is conditional rendering. So I wanted to make certain that if the pet is a dog, then we can ask if they have a fenced-in yard, because it doesn't really make sense to ask them do they have a fenced-in yard if it is a cat. Okay, I'm not a cat owner, but I think dogs really care more about that than cats. So I made sure that this form field only appears if the pet in question is a dog. Now we'll have to go ahead and change our logic a bit for handle change, because we do have checkboxes, and checkboxes have a checked property which other input elements don't have. So we're going to do a little bit of an if statement. So what we're going to do is we're going to do if type, and the type, this like variable type here tells us like what type of element are we dealing with, equals, and then we're going to do checkbox. All right, and then I'll have else, and then my other set form values will be put in my else block, because that, it's fine for everything else. But if it's a checkbox, then what we're going to do is we're going to do pretty similar to what we did before, set form values. Okay, and then we're going to do previous, and then we're going to pass in an object, and that object is going to contain all of the values from the previous, except for the name. We're looking for the thing that changed. And we're going to do e.target, and I'm going to cast it as an HTML input element. Thank you, TypeScript. Okay, dot checked. Okay, the only reason I did that was so that TypeScript knew that it's an HTML input element and it has that checked property. All right, this is a case where TypeScript actually just leads to more typing. Let's see how our form looks. Okay, it looks pretty decent. We've got the about yourself. We've got the checkboxes over here. We may need to do a little bit more styling to get them all the way over. That's fine, but as you can see, we have the different places where people can put their information. Okay, we'll just tweak the CSS a little bit to get this to look nicer. But again, you can go to github.com and look at all of the typing I did to get all this in here. But the main point is this submit. All right, so now we're getting ready to actually submit our form. So how do we tell React, like, hey, when I submit the form, I would like you to do X, Y, and Z? Well, what we can do is go back up to the form tag, and we have the event on submit. Submit is equal to, and then we're just going to pass in the function. We haven't made the on submit function yet, but we're about to. So above it, we're going to do function on submit. Function on submit. All right, so what that will do is that will basically say, okay, cool, take this function and run it when the person submits or clicks that submit button. And we know that that is going to be the case because we have a button with type submit. All right, so the browser will trigger the submit event, and the submit event is like hooked into this function that we're going to create. All right, TypeScript wants us to actually put the type here. So React form event HTML form element. Thank you, TypeScript. All right, so React.form event HTML form element. And if you're wondering how the heck did I know that, I had to go look it up. You're not going to psychically know the correct type to put in these situations. So we have to prevent default to keep the page from refreshing, which is the default behavior. And then we are going to do some logic in here. So for example, let's say I wanted to take everything from the form and submit it to something. So for example, I wanted to take the form and save it to my REST API. So in order to do that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go and handle that in our service. So let's go over to the service. And where's our service? Over here, pet service. So what we're going to need to have, we're going to have an endpoint. We're going to have a functionality to actually take the adoption form and post it. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't like putting it in pet service though, because that's not the domain. So we're going to make adoption service.ts. Neat. All right, so in here we're going to do, I'm going to borrow the first part though, because we do need the API URL. Except this time instead of pets, it's going to be adoption. Okay, as the resource. All right. When we do this, make certain that in db.json that you have an adoptions endpoint. Like even if it's just blank, you could do adoptions : and then brackets and then nothing in it. All right, so that it knows what to do about that. It's plural. All right, so let's do export const post adoption form, like post adoption, I guess we'll call it, equals async form values, adoption form values. And I just realized I should probably take, this will need to be imported. It's not exported anywhere. So let's go back. Let's take this interface and let's put it in with the rest of our models. Right, models, what do I call this? Adoption form. .ts. Paste it in, and we'll do export. That way we're able to export it. That will break this. We'll have to import it. No problem. And now the adoption service can also use it. Okay, so we're going to do adoption form. What is it? Pet adoption. So what do we call it? Adoption form. Yep. So adoption form. And that will import it. All right, cool. Arrow. All right, now we're going to go ahead and use, so it will return a promise of, we'll just use any for the moment. Okay, I know it's not very TypeScripty, but I just want a promise of something. Const response is equal to await axios.post. Backtick, and then we'll do $API URL, and then we already have adoptions up front, and then we can also post the form values. All right, has no idea what Axios is, so we're going to import that. Okay, and then what I call is API URL with all capitals. There we go. Neat. And then we're going to return response.data. Okay, we don't actually, not going to really return anything, but we are just going to use this to go ahead and post the adoption form. So we go back to the adoption form, pet adoption form. I'll close some of these out to reduce confusion. All right, so we go back to on submit, and now what we can do is we can take our form and we can go ahead and submit it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do post adoption, and then we're going to go ahead and pass in the state, which is form values. All right, and that will be able to post. Now, we may want to show a specific kind of thank you for posting, we'll get back to you kind of things. Like when people post a form, they want to know hey, did my form go through and is someone looking at it? So what we can do is we can add another little piece of state. Let's add it above this. So we'll do const form submitted, set form submitted, and this will be equal to useState Boolean. And it will start off with false. So what we can do is we can basically say hey, when they submit the form, we'll display a little message saying thanks for, whatever. Thanks for wanting to adopt one of our pets. One of our team members will get back to you. So what we'll do is we'll go back into here and we'll use that conditional rendering. So what we'll do is we'll say if, let's do, what was the form submitted. So if the form is submitted, then we'll use a ternary operator and we'll display the alert. Otherwise, we'll do the whole form. I'm going to just move this to the end of the form, because I don't want to copy and paste all that stuff. So we'll just put it here. All right. And then now we'll be able to put a little alert. So we'll do alert. Okay, and then we'll have to import that. And then we can put some stuff in here. We'll say one of our team members will get back with you as soon as possible. Thanks. All right, so that will only show once the form is submitted. So let's give this a shot. We need to debug a little bit, but let's give this a try. So Jonathan, we'll just put some random stuff. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. info@codingyourcareer.com. I'm me all day long. Okay, and just some random stuff. Okay, and then we'll submit. See what happens. All right, so we submitted. I think we forgot to tell it that we had submitted, so let's go ahead and do that. So we go to on submit. Yep, so we forgot. And so what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and do set form submitted to true. Okay, so let's go back and try that again. A little goof on my part. Okay, so we'll submit. And now the form is submitted, one of our team members will get back with you as soon as possible. Thanks. All right, that's awesome. So now we're able to fill out an adoption form given our pet. In fact, we could even put a little information about them at the top, which would make sense. But this is basically how a form works. So to review, and again, forms are pretty rough. With a form, we have a piece of state to back the form. What I mean by that is a form, you're filling out fields, you're checking boxes, you're filling out fields, you're doing all sorts of stuff. So you need a piece of state to hold that data. You can either have one state per field, or you can do what I do and create an interface that represents your entire form, where each property represents one field that someone is filling out or checking off. Okay. We also learned about the onChange event. Okay, onChange and value. Value is the thing that's going to be linked to the state, and onChange is going to be using the set state in order to change the state of that's backing this form. So this first name, all right, is going to have, like, for example, set first name. Now I use a more advanced technique where I didn't want to write 9 different states for everything. So what I did instead was I create a more generalized handle change function. Okay. Whenever you have this method, what happens is it raises an event, and in TypeScript, that's react.changeEvent HTML input element. You just have to look that up. There's no way to know that like randomly. You're just going to have to go do a little digging, or just refer back to this tutorial. What I did was I destructured the target to get its name, value, and type. And then what I did was I did set form values, which again is that method up here, it's set form values I use for the state. And I use a spread operator. What I said was take the object as it is and fill it in with all of its values, except if it's the one that I like typed. Okay, so if it's like the one I'm currently editing, that one is going to be the new value. All right, so it will basically go through and be like, did they change first name? No. Did they change middle name? No. Did they change last name? Yes. Then I will change last name and fill everything else in with what was already there. All right, so we have a submit button at the very bottom with type equals submit. And when you submit a form, what happens is it will go on submit. You have the event on the form, and it will run this function. So I call the function on submit. I could have just as well called it, I don't know, a totem pole, whatever you feel like, and it will run this function. e.react, the event is react.formEvent HTML form element. Again, you had to go look that up. I would not expect anyone to memorize or psychically know that. And then on the submit, you can do what you want. In this case, I did prevent default. I posted the adoption form to the database and set form submitted to be true. And then I added some like the conditional. So I said if the form is submitted, then I will show an alert. Otherwise, I will go ahead and show the form. React forms are probably going to take a lot of your time because they can be very big, and forms, as we all know, can be quite complicated. This isn't even the most complicated form that there is. So, but again, as long as you remember that forms, like the strategy of doing a form is having a state to back each of the things that the person's filling out, and then you can use the onSubmit to actually do something with the state, with all the data you collected from the form, then I think you'll go pretty far with React Forms. If you made it this far, you're a champion. Thank you very much for watching. It is always my pleasure to be able to share knowledge about React and other front-end frameworks with people who are trying to break into tech. This by no means was a comprehensive everything there is to know about React. That is just too big to do in one sitting. There are a number of different topics you can get into, like lifting up state. That would be very good. But I basically wanted to be able to give you enough knowledge to kind of go off and maybe do your own project and see like why people are talking about React. This has been Coding Your Career. I have my link down below to my link tree. You can catch me on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. I'm all over the social webs. Our website is codingyourcareer.com if you want to take a look at that. My goal is to try to help people get into tech so that they can change their life in the way that I did. Thanks for watching.